guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video I'm very excited for because it's one of my favorite recommendation videos to make. That's right, today I'm going to be chatting through some books I think are perfect to make you fall back in love with reading. Whether you're in a bit of a reading slump and you need something you know is going to be a guaranteed home run, or maybe you haven't read in quite a long while and you're looking for a book that will really reignite your passion for reading. I'm here today to not only recommend some of my favorite books, but also books that I think are really approachable and will really suck you into them while reading them. Basically, I would say I have books in three primary categories. First, books that are extremely plot forward, full of twists and turns, and just pacing that you'll not be able to put down. Books that are more cozy and heartwarming that maybe have a dash of romance, stories that will really burrow into your heart and put a smile on your face. And lastly, I have some more intense character-focused stories that are emotional. Structurally, with how they're written, I still feel like they're very quick reads. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. The first book I have to recommend is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This is definitely a book that falls into that category of being very, very plot forward. This is a sci-fi thriller story and a book I promise you will not be able to put down. I think Blake Crouch in general is a great author to check out if you're trying to get back into reading, especially if you love thriller-leaning stories. But this is a story that follows our main character Jason, and at the beginning of this book, he's just walking home, looking forward to spending the night with his wife and beloved son. However, though, the last thing he remembers hearing before being knocked out by an abductor is, "Are you happy with your life?" From there, Jason finds himself waking up in a laboratory and everyone is congratulating him and also welcoming him back. He's incredibly confused, and Jason begins to piece together that this world that he has woken up in is not the world that he once knew. He's no longer the ordinary physics professor, he's no longer married, he doesn't have a son, but now he's a celebrated genius that somehow solved the impossible, and everything begins to spiral from there. This is a story about parallel worlds and other lives. It's absolutely breakneck in terms of its plotting. It's also really well written and honestly blew my mind and highly entertained me. Again, if you're looking for a page turner and something that will be very, very shocking, this is a great book and author in general to check out. Another mystery leaning story I'm happy to recommend is The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the first book to a new series. This is a great pickup if you're more of a whodunit mystery reader versus like a straight up thriller, because this is a fantasy story that's very much inspired by the vibe of Sherlock Holmes with a Sherlock and Watson-like character, and it's both so much fun with a lot of humor and great character dynamics, but also has a really, really shocking mystery at the core of it, with our two unlikely characters working together to try to solve it. This series is set in a very unusual fantasy world that I kind of describe as like Godzilla meets Attack on Titan. Basically, there is an empire that's surrounded by these massive walls, and these walls are there to protect the populace from these giant sea monsters that come out once a year and try to like destroy everything around them. Therefore, individuals in the army and in the engineering corps are super important. At the beginning of the story, we're introduced to one of our main characters, Din, and Din has a set of very unique abilities. Basically, utilizing scent, he's able to remember everything around him, which makes him obviously a very key figure for any type of investigation. And he's just been recently assigned to a new boss named Anna, who's apparently a very esteemed and impressive detective, but he quickly realizes that she's very strange and very demanding, and he's not sure if he likes her too much. But at the beginning of the story, they're both assigned a very unusual case which surrounds this very powerful engineer who was found dead. But this man unfortunately did not pass away in a usual fashion, but instead he had an entire tree combust out of his body. From there, we follow Anna and Din as they plunge headfirst into a very large political conspiracy. There are so many different twists and turns to uncover in this story, and again, the combination of great character dynamics and just going along for the ride in this whodunit style story was great. It's very clever, it's very unique, and I personally adored it. Another very plot forward story I feel like I recommend all the time for anyone who's looking to get back into reading, in particular if you're interested in picking up fantasy again, and that would be The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. The series is popular and beloved for a reason. It's really fun, it's really interesting, it has great characters, and it will constantly try to blow your mind over and over and over again. Definitely very plot forward, but I also promise that there are a lot of different characters to fall in love with as well. This is a fantasy series that's set in a fantasy world with the concept of what would happen if the bad guy won. This fantasy world has been ruled by the Dark Lord for like thousands of years, and life is really tough. This world also has a very interesting magic system centered around the consumption of metals. Different metals give you different abilities, and if you're something called Mistborn, that means you have access to all of the metals. At the beginning of this book, we are following our main character who basically just discovers she's Mistborn, and she gets wrapped up with this ragtag group of individuals who are basically trying to pull off off this impossible heist. This is a series that Brandon Sanderson successfully just like keeps upping the ante in. It's very entertaining. It has some coming of age elements. It has some romantic elements. It has so many fun characters again to fall in love with, but the key and the star of this book is the plot. It is mind-boggling and so much fun. I feel like this is a great series to pick up if you're just wanting to be entertained, if you want like a good summer trilogy to keep you going, if you're doing some traveling soon. It's been read and loved by people who like fantasy or not, and for good reason. Next up, I have some more emotional literary fiction options. The first is How High We Go in the Dark by Sagoya Nagamatsu. This book I feel like is a great book to check out if you're looking to get back into reading, not only because it's beautifully written, emotional, has so many interesting concepts that the author explores, but structurally it's actually a very quick read. This reads very much like a collection of short stories, but it's definitely a novel because all of the short stories sort of work together, creating one narrative experience. But every chapter does feel very contained, so it's very easy to pick up and put back down, and also feel like you're getting a lot of progress in because you're kind of just reading all of these little mini stories together. This story is sort of set in the near future, and it progresses further and further into the future. The first story basically opens up with a grieving parent traveling to Antarctica to take on his daughter's research. There, he basically uncovers a pathogen that sort of takes over and transforms the world. Every story following that, we see how the world has changed and transformed from this sort of central moment in time. And it's both beautiful and heartbreaking. It's a story about humanity. There's just so many different angles the author sort of takes and sort of unpacks the emotions of this time period. And honestly, there are some stories and chapters I think about to this day. In particular, there is a chapter surrounding an amusement park. I laughed, I cried. I really feel like the author just made me like think so deeply about the world and humanity. I just really appreciated this book so much. It's also not very long at all, and again, structurally, I just feel like it reads so quickly. But I also feel like it's a great book to pick up if you're looking to dip your toes back into reading itself. Next book I have to recommend is Toown by Fredrik Backman. Honestly, any Fredrik Backman book I feel like is a great place to turn to if you're trying to get back into reading. Many of his books are not only just universally beloved, but a lot of them have also been adapted into television shows and movies. In particular, Toown has an HBO adaptation that's also highly reviewed. And this is also a book that my partner read and devoured, and he does not read very much at all. So I feel like that's a good endorsement, if anything. But this is another beautiful but heartbreaking story of community growing up. This is a story set in the tiny town of Toown. Toown is a community set far into the forest. It's a remote town, and hockey here is life. Hockey is not just a pastime for the people living in Toown, it's a way of life. It's their entertainment, and it's also a large part of the town's economy too. And not a lot has gone right in Toown in a long time. There has been a bit of hope sparking in the community because the junior hockey team is actually about to take on these semifinals, and if they win, they have a huge opportunity to bring more attention and jobs to the town because, again, hockey is very important. And all the hopes and dreams and expectations of this town have been placed on the shoulders of a bunch of teenage boys. However, though, on the precipice of this big match, something unbelievably tragic occurs, leaving one young girl traumatized and her life changed forever. And I feel like this back blurb on this book also does a great job sort of encapsulating this story. It says, "This is a story about a town and a game, but even more, it's about loyalty, commitment, and the responsibilities of friendship, the people we disappoint even though we love them, and the decisions we make every day that come to define us. In this story of a small forest town, Fredrik Backman has found the world." This is truly a beautiful book. At times, it's incredibly difficult to read. Throughout it, you're reading from the perspectives of almost everyone in town. From members of this hockey team, you see their hopes and dreams, their friendships. You read people within the town and communities, some down on their luck, some much more successful and powerful. You read from the perspectives of a young girl and her friends, just excited about life and being a teenager. But then you also begin to see the cracks in this community, the disheartening reality that it can exist when people begin to distrust and also to blame. It's again really, really well done, and I do feel like Fredrik Backman created this story with a lot of empathy and care. I was sobbing reading this book at so many different points. How the author was able to capture so many different experiences and moments of youth and choice and just these pivotal decisions on like what makes us who we are. It was just so well done. And I also feel like the hockey components of this book, which I was kind of nervous about going in because I don't really know a lot about hockey, the author did a great job not only explaining the sport, but also making the hockey events exciting. Again, a heartbreaking and difficult story to read, but one I would highly recommend. Very character focused, and I would also say a pretty quick read. Like once you get in it, it just will really hook you and grip you. Alrighty, next up I have some more cozy leaning reads, books that will definitely warm your heart. The first is the Monk and Robot series, the first one being A Psalm for the Wild Built and the sequel being A Prayer for the Crowned Shy. These are a part of a short story collection, so obviously they're not very long at all, so definitely quick read. Also a fantastic series to just remind you of like the beauty of stories. I reread this all of the time. It simply is one of like my favorite tales and stories I've read in years. It has lived in my heart ever since I picked the first one up. It's the perfect combination of like endearing, cozy, heartwarming, beautiful characters, such an interesting world and community in which it's set in. I just love everything about this. But to take a step back, this story is set in kind of a post-apocalyptic world in which capitalism has been done away with, and there was also this robot uprising resulting in humanity to sort of strip back their world, and now it's very community-centric and much smaller. We follow our main character who works as a tea monk, and they basically travel from town to town offering not only tea but advice and just kind of an ear to listen to people's problems. They thought this profession would sort of give them the solace and the direction they needed in life, but they're still feeling a little bit lost at the beginning of this book, and they're craving sort of a journey for themselves. So they decide to venture out into the wilderness, which hasn't really been done because there are like safe paths and unsafe paths ever since the sort of end of the world. But our main character decides to just go for it, and once they do, they stumble into an unlikely character named Mosscap, who is a robot who's really excited to meet humanity and learn all about their stories. And so begins the most unlikely friendship, and it's just so endearing. It's about two people coming from two different worlds, sharing and getting to know each other. It's so funny and clever. And I just have to say, the amount of like heart that Becky Chambers was able to capture in two small stories, it's truly remarkable. I just adore these books so much. I swear, you will laugh, you will cry, you will just reread them immediately. If you want something that'll just make you feel good and hopeful, check out this series for sure. Another very fun and cozy read would be Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia Fairies. This is such a fun combination of romance and fantasy, definitely more character focused and romance forward, but it does have a very intriguing fantasy plotline that's easy to follow and very engaging as well. In this story, we're introduced to our main character, Emily Wilde, and she is like one of the foremost experts on Fae in this world, and she is a professor at Cambridge. It sort of has an unknown historical setting. At the beginning of book one, Emily is working on her like life's work, which is this encyclopedia documenting all the different stories and lore of Fae, and she's just missing a few final installments for it. So she's traveling to a remote community to hopefully learn some stories from the people that live there, but she's sort of having a hard time integrating herself because she kind of is socially awkward. She's especially frustrated when her work rival also arrives, named Wendell, who's very charismatic, a little flighty, and difficult to deal with. He very much gives Hal from Hal's Moving Castle vibes, but they decide to work together to get these stories that she needs. But also, things begin to go wrong when a set of Fae-related instances begin to affect the town, and Emily and Wendell get wrapped up in this. Again, a great combination of just charming and cute romance that exists between our two main characters, a great town and community to learn about, and the Fae elements of this book are super cool. Really well done and handled with so much care. There are like footnotes throughout this explaining different Fae stories. It's just really entertaining, a great balance of like plot and mystery with like great character moments and romance. I just love this series. It's so cute, and I love the pacing of the romance as well. It's delightful. And the last book I'm going to recommend is for readers out there that want something that's a little spooky, a little scary, a little melodramatic, but also has some romance. The author and the book I'm going to recommend to you is The Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. I love this author's writing so much. Not only does she make such breakneck plots with so many twists and turns that will pull you in, but she also centers her stories with so much delicious melodrama and romance that's just a blast. Like if you want something that's spooky, scary, but still has kind of a romantic lean, these are the books for you. And the audiobooks in particular are great. So if you want something for work, if you want something for the gym, definitely check out Isabel Cañas's books and her audiobooks. Vampires of El Norte is set in the 1840s and follows our main character Nina. And Nina is familiar with strange creatures sort of roaming the night because she was actually attacked as a young girl by something that nobody really knows, and her life's been sort of changed ever since that moment. The attacks though has sort of dwindled though, but with rising tensions between the rancheros that live in the area and settlers coming in from the north trying to steal land, violence is definitely on the rise. Not only are there armed scrimmages occurring between these two different groups of people, but there also appears to be more attacks by these strange creatures. Nina's life especially gets complicated because her family sort of gets involved directly in one of these fights, and she herself like wants to be on the front to help protect her family. And she also runs into a figure from her past who she thought she'd never see again. Again, this book balances romance, melodrama, literally vampires, and also combining it with a great historical setting that's influenced by real history, utilizing real information. It's a perfect mix of things that's just created one of the most entertaining books I have read in a long while, and I just simply would recommend this book so much. Her other book, which is called The Hacienda, centers like a hot priest in a haunted house. If you're looking for more like gothic horror vibes, but truly, I love this author immensely. I will read anything and everything that she puts out. Truly a blast. Alrighty guys, those are some books that I think will help you fall back in love with reading, or just some books that I personally think are amazing, and if you haven't read, you should definitely check out. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you soon with another one soon. Goodbye!